A lack of proper investment in education is leading to many parents not being able to provide their children with quality education. Parents are advised to start saving for their children's education early and to invest in growth asset funds that can beat inflation. Investments such as education policies have become irrelevant over the years as they often do not have good returns.
Investing in your child's education is a long-term investment. Experts say to benefit from compound interest, you should start doing this as soon as the child is born. And because time is on your side, you should not be risk-averse and put your money in a bank account, but rather invest in growth assets that can beat inflation. Diversifying your portfolio will help you to get good returns on your investment.
Investing for a 2-year-old who's going to go to university at the age of 18, which is in 16 years' time, then putting money into a bank account and receiving single-digit returns is probably not the best way to actually do it. So the longer the investment horizon, the more risk you want to take in your investment portfolio, because then you've got a higher chance of achieving the returns that you're looking for and therefore investing a lot less to achieve the same goal as what you're preparing for. So the important thing about investing for a child's education is to look at what is the period that you're actually investing for, what are the costs of that education, and therefore what kind of return are you going to achieve from the portfolio that you're putting together.
I don't think it's a good idea to be risk averse because it's a long-term investment. And remember, over the long term, there is inflation. So the problem with putting all your money in cash over the long term is you will not beat inflation. So that means you cannot afford to be risk averse. You need to expose your money to growth assets. When I say growth assets, I'm talking about things like shares or equities and listed property.
Investments such as unit trusts, exchange-traded funds and Cetric Top 40 are flexible with low costs. Education policies are no longer relevant because of their high cost structure, high penalties and low returns. And although endowment policies have low returns, they have some tax benefits.
The problem with endowments is that if your marginal tax rate is not more than 30%, then it's not really worth it to invest in that vehicle because an endowment is taxed within itself at 30% within the product. So if you are paying less than 30% tax, it's not tax savvy to invest in that vehicle. However, there are advantages to using an endowment because you can nominate a beneficiary. So should something happen to you, the money will pay directly to the beneficiary. Another vehicle you can consider is a tax-free savings account. The only trick with the tax-free savings account is you should remember there are contribution limits. So an annual contribution limit of 2,750.
If you do not invest for your child's education, you will struggle to cope with the escalating cost of education in the long run. Education inflation has been increasing at a rate of about 10% per year, which is way above the inflation rate. So you need to invest in products that can give you returns that are higher than the inflation rate. It will cost you 5.5 million rand to educate your child from grade 1 to university if you are taking your child to a private school. And if your child is going to a public school, you will fork out 3.5 million rand. This is assuming inflation is at 8% at the time. Some parents have been forced to remove their children from private schools as they battle with the high fees.
The greatest risk that parents run by not actually planning properly is that they will not be able to finance the education that their children actually require. And that is probably the biggest disservice we can do for our children, particularly because we've got more than enough time to actually plan for that outcome. For us to think we're going to be able to depend on government to provide free education, free quality education, is probably something that we cannot rely on today. Therefore, each parent has got a responsibility to say, what are the costs of the type of education that I want my child to have, and therefore how much do I need to invest today?
Experts have called on investors to be consistent and disciplined with their investment and not to pull out when the going gets tough.
The biggest challenge we have as advisors in the market is actually managing the behavior of our clients. So often somebody comes to you and says, I'm investing this money for 10 years. In the first 2 years, the market is negative, and you're trying to advise the person to stay invested in the market for the 10-year period, and then the person becomes impatient and withdraws the money. At that point, that's a bad investment, because you've put money for a year, you've lost money, and therefore the decision you make makes that investment bad. But somebody that's more disciplined and actually sits in for the full investment period often finds out that at the end of the 10 years, 11 years, 12 years, they make the returns that they were actually looking for.
I would like to hear your views on this topic. My email address is mulifint@sabc.co.za. My Twitter handle is @mulifinaledi.